Start soon. Yeah. Have a nice evening. Welcome, everyone. I'm very happy that you are here. We are hosting the second international seminar of the Hungarian ProGEO this evening, and we have two presenters in this afternoon. The first presenter will be Drisela Kraja, who is a PhD student at the Eötvös Loránd University in the Institute of Cartography and Geoinformatics, and she does research on geodiversity and geodiversity assessment. And the second presenter will be Károly Németh, who is the chair of the IUGS Geosites Sub-commission. Just a few words about this initiation that we are just attending. Last year, we decided to make this seminar, and now it's a series of seminars from the side of the Hungarian ProGEO, just to talk about geoheritage. As you know, last month was the well-known month of geodiversity, but geodiversity didn't stop existing by the end of October, and after the 6th of October, we have to talk about it, and because we have very nice topics and very important issues about geodiversity and geoheritage. And by making this series of seminars, we hope that some new research works, like the research work of Drisela, who is a PhD student, and well-known scholars can contribute to the case, the issue of geodiversity, to make it more distributable, to emphasize the importance of geodiversity. With these starting words, I would like to give the floor to Drisela, and for her very big surprise, I will ask her to introduce herself, to talk a little bit about his background. How did she get to ELTE? How did she knew us, the educators of the Institute of Cartography and Geoinformatics, and how did she started to work with geodiversity? Drisela, if you could switch on your camera, and if you could show yourself to us.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, I can hear you, and I hope that all the others can hear you. So the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Now I started to shake, really. But thank you very much for this opportunity. It's a great honor and pleasure to be here today. My name is Drisela Kraja, and I am from Albania. And I'm in the third year of my PhD studies in Eötvös University, Department of Geoinformatics and Cartography. Previously, I've been in Albania, so in Polytechnic University of Albania, studying bachelor and master in geoinformatic engineering. And there was an Erasmus program where I was connected with ELTE University and our department. So the department that I'm already now learning or studying PhD. And it was a program in my master studies. And it was the COVID time. But even though it was very difficult for me to get to know people here because of all the problems during the COVID time, I luckily managed to meet every professor here, including also Martin. And when I read his study, I was really intrigued by it. And I was thinking that, okay, we also have those opportunities and those nice things that we can talk about Albania. So why not also do a geodiversity assessment in Albania, since it's also not made up previously. This was briefly a presentation. Can I start with my presentation of the thesis that I made? Okay.
Of course, you can. Thank you for the introduction.
So please let me know if you can see it.
We see the PowerPoint and not the presentation mode. I don't know if you made it full screen already.
Yes, I made it full screen.
So we don't see it. Not the full screen.
What about now?
No, I think I will go to your office.
Okay. Here.
Cannot I see the... This is because you are sharing the you are sharing the PowerPoint and not the screen.
Okay.
Okay. So we are going to share your screen. Okay, and hopefully please do the
magic.
Do the magic. There is the... I think we can live together with your taskbar down there.
Okay. So
okay, we can see.
Okay, thank you. So I will continue, but before really starting this presentation, I would like to emphasize that this presentation is even more special to me because we're meeting on November 29th, which is a significant national holiday for Albanians, together with yesterday's day. So November 28th marks our declaration of independence in 1912. And November 29th is Liberation Day, commemorating the end of World War II in 1944. The title of my today's presentation is Cultural Heritage and Geodiversity in One Place, the Rozafa Castle in Albania. In this presentation, we will look at how Rozafa Castle, which is a cultural heritage monument located in Shkodra, shows the connection between Albania's natural beauty and its rich history. In my opinion, it's a great example on how geodiversity and cultural heritage come together to tell one of the many fascinating stories of Albania. The study area. So Rozafa Castle, it's not just one of the biggest, one of the largest and most important castles in Albania, but it's also rich in historical, cultural, geological, and environmental significance. So its strategic location is on a hill 130 meters above the sea level. And this is very important because it made it a stronghold in Albanian's past. A recent geodiversity assessment of the region identified that the area of Rozafa Castle as a hotspot. So the geodiversity index in that area was high, showing the rich interplay of geological, morphological, and cultural elements. Talking a little bit about the methodology and data processing before we continue in this, I would like to explain the term geodiversity for anyone who might not be familiar with it. So geodiversity is an interdisciplinary science and relatively new. It's defined as the natural diversity of the geological, which we mean rocks and minerals, on paleontological, pedological, geomorphological, and hydrological features. Geodiversity can be calculating using these data processed by geographic information operations. The results in the end will be a map showing the value of the diversity index per unit area. About the size of the cell, it's very important to really calculate it before doing every other step. So the size of the area is very important to know also the size of the cell. So the size of the cell can go from 1 to 1 kilometer to 25 to 25 kilometer. The size that I used here in the study is 2 times 2 kilometer cell size. So starting first with the geological index was calculated using the 1 to 200,000 scale geological map of Albania. And this subindex was calculated by counting the number of different lithological and stratigraphical units within each grid cell. The second one, which is the paleontological index, was calculated with the same principle that was used in the geological subindex by counting the number of different soil units within each grid cell, and I used the 1 to 250,000 soil map. The mineral occurrences subindex was also calculated using the European Geological Data Infrastructure, EGDI. The mineral occurrences subindex was also calculated by counting all the various elements in each grid cells. And last but not least, we also have the geomorphological index, which is a more complex one. It consists of 2 key components, the hydrology and the relief. For both of the sub-indexes, SRTM and MERIT data was used. The method that I used in this presentation was from Pereira and Paul and Albert. So in summary, in the end, each 2 times 2 kilometer cell of the grid system represents a number of different lithostratigraphic, fossil, soil, geomorphological units, and mineral elements in it. So now, working with the base maps of different scales can give significant challenges due to the varying level of the complexity. As I already mentioned before, I used the geological map of 1 to 200,000 scale, and also the soil map 1 to 250,000 scale. So it's very difficult when it comes to different scales of the maps. So because of this, we also use the normalized index. Normalizing means that the values will range from 0 to 1, and none of the diversity components will be over or underrepresented compared to the others. As we see from the maps here, the overall result indicate that the Shkodra region is characterized by many areas with medium and high geodiversity index, but 4 main hotspots can be distinguished. The first one is Teti National Park in the northern part of the city, of the municipality. We have Vauideis Reservoir, the second one, number 2. Number 3 is Lake Shkodra, together with Shiroka and Zogay settlements. These settlements are touristic attractions. And number 4, Buna River. With red dot close to number 3, we can see the location of Rozafa Castle, which is in a high geodiversity index scale, as we mentioned previously. In these pictures, I also showed some illustration of hydrodiversity areas that I mentioned. So the picture A, we have the Teti National Park, which is situated in Albanian Alps. And here it's represented as a key geodiversity hotspot. Picture B is the point where Buna, Drini, and Kiri, 3 main rivers, join. And this picture was captured from the Rozafa Castle. And picture C, Lake Shkodra, which is the largest lake in Balkan Peninsula, along with Shiroka and Zogaj settlements, which are very important in this area and have a high geodiversity index because this area is characterized by a diverse range of karst features. To better understand the importance, a drone survey was made and a detailed 3D model of the castle was created, of the Rozafa castle. First, we had 7 ground control points. We measured them, where 2 of the main points were used as strong points and the other 5 points were used as helping points. I want to emphasize here that the distribution of these points are non-uniformly in the field. The type of drone that I use is DJI Mavic Pro, and the reason I use this drone is that it's, first of all, it's affordable, it's easy to use, small, and of course, lightweight. The 3D Survey Pilot app was used to create the fly path, the exact trajectory that the drone flew, and the drone was flying for 10 minutes and 36 seconds with taking around 400 pictures, meaning that the frequency of the photo itself was programmed every 2 seconds. The 3D model of Rozafa Castle was generated using Agisoft Metashape software, and the coordinate system is VGS 84 UTM zone 34N. The Agisoft is known for its photogrammetry software capabilities, and it's usually used to process the digital images to create high-quality 3D models and maps. In the 3D model of Rozafa Castle, the castle walls, along with the objects found inside of it, can be detected, as we can see in this first picture. Then next, the topographic map of Rozafa Castle was created, which gives a detailed and georeferenced representation of the castle's area. The third one is the geomorphone index map. I also created the geomorphone index map, which you can see that the value is higher on the perimeter of the walls, northern part, and we can identify here potential hazards and make it easier to understand the dynamic of the landscape itself. The fourth one is the hillshade, which provides a multidimensional visualization of the castle, of course, along with the digital surface model. And the final results, and the main one, is the orthomosaic, which gives, of course, a detailed representation of the castle's area. About the discussions now, overall, the study highlights the importance of the integration of geodiversity into modern and digital technologies by merging insights from advanced digital tools and geodiversity. It can lead to understanding our Earth's diverse geofeatures and contribute to the conservation and management of natural and cultural heritage. There are several ways to use the 3D survey of Rozafa Castle, which is the result of my study. For example, in tourism aspect, it would be very interesting to be featured on travel websites or different advertisements, making visitors to come and explore it. In preservation efforts, the castle's current state is documented, but it can also be used to simulate how the castle might have looked in the past, which is really interesting, in my opinion, to have that one as well. And by focusing on the geomorphological and geodiversity aspects, the visualization can be very useful to deepen the understanding of the processes and promote the environmental awareness. Last page. I hope this presentation inspires you to see how history and nature are deeply connected and motivated you to explore Albania's incredible heritage for yourself. As we say in Albanian, when you have a story to tell, you have a treasure to share. Kur ke një histori për treguar, ke një testar për të ndarë, which is a really important thing for us. And as you can see here, you can find my contact details, and you can freely write on email, and I can answer whatever question you might have. But you can also scan the QR code, and you can read the paper that I already wrote. Thank you all for your time and for your interest today. And of course, it's been a pleasure sharing this part of Albania with you.
Thank you, Drisela. I think we have time for discussion after your presentation. And while the others are thinking about questions and points to share with you, I would like to share my questions regarding your presentation. And just a background for Drisela's presentation, I would like you to introduce the prize or achievement. I don't know how can I say that you got awarded for this presentation in the summer.
Yes, it was a conference in Bulgaria, conference of geoinformation and cartography, which ICCGIS, which I got awarded as an ambassador of the conference with this presentation. So it was one of my proudest achievement that I already got up until now. So I'm really proud of it. And thank you for reminding. But usually I'm too shy to show the awards that I got or something like that.
That's why I mentioned this award and not you. So the question, how difficult was the integration of data? The integration of data for the geodiversity assessment. And did you find, that's one question. And the second question, did you find some close connections between the geomorphon categorization or classification and the location of the castle or the surroundings of the castle? Were there any traces of human-induced activities recognizable in the geomorphon classification?
Mm-hmm. Okay. So first about how difficult it was. Of course, it was really difficult because first of all, you have a map, but the map is not digitized. So you have to make from scratch the whole shape files that you need, for example, for geological map and for, of course, for the hydrology map. Some of the data were actually open source. So those were some data that you can also find, as I already mentioned in my presentation here. So the European Geological Data Infrastructure is an open source data. So you can take the mineralogical data here very easily. But if you want a specific thing like geological map and soil map, it's very difficult to find because they are only represented as a paper. So only represented as a main map. And about the SRTM and MERIT digital elevation model, of course, there are also open data, so it's freely available and you can take it online. And about the second question about the geomorphon index, as we can you see my moving? Okay. So here you can see that the geomorphon index is high. And if you see on the hillshade here, these are the traces. So this is very important to study the geomorphon part of it because, of course, that we have to keep an eye on this, especially on this area, the northern part of the castle, because as I also mentioned previously, it can be happening some hazards or, of course, especially Shkodra part, which has earthquakes a lot of times, can damage a lot the castle as well. So, of course, we should put much more effort and much more importance in these types of areas in the castle.
One more thing that just came into my mind, and I will forget it. So sorry for the others. I will I will ask you now. Have you tried the geomorphon classification from the UAV data for the UAV data?
No, I should use it, but
I'm
I
not
will
sure.
also.
I'm not sure.
Well, of course, we always have to try it if it works. And then if we see the results and it really works, that of course it has something to discuss. But it's worth trying first.
Definitely. Yes. Others, do you have any questions? Anybody in the audience? Shireen, I see that your hand is up. Please.
Hi, morning, everybody. Thank you for your presentation, Drisela. I had two questions. I guess the first one is maybe slightly a comment, and I think Pal may have alluded to some of what I wanted to ask in terms of making a connection with the geoheritage and the cultural heritage, the geodiversity, sorry, and the cultural heritage. I think that's where we are missing a little bit some of the connection. And the second thing is the scale. Do you think that scale impacts the generation of the value for the geodiversity index? Meaning, I mean, we're in Jamaica and our geology is very diverse, and you can walk 100 meters and you have a different geology every time. So I wondered if in your study, or anybody's for that matter, if scale has been a major factor in trying to determine the index, because if the geology is so varied, how can it be determined? And if you have any experience of that, it would be interesting to know. I guess that's my question, Pal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Where to start? Starting from the a part of the cultural heritage connection and the geodiversity. Of course, even Martin just explained that it's very important, like why are we also studying the geodiversity and why do we also have these cultural heritage, which are really important for us and for the future. In my opinion and in my point of view, I think that by merging these insights of the cultural heritage together with the geodiversity, and if we can make it together with advanced digital tools like creating drone measurements, we can better understand what is going on in certain areas, not only in the Rozafa castle, but in certain areas as well. That's why, in my opinion, it was really interesting and important to make this connection. As for the second question, for the scale, of course, about the geological map, let's focus more on the geological map. Rozafa, Shkodra region, or the whole Albania, has 1 to 200,000 scale of geological map, but also 1 to 100,000 scale geological map. I was looking in details if we have any big changes regarding these two maps, but it was not that big of difference. And of course, it was better to use the 1 to 200,000 geological map, because if you see the geological map of the area, it is very, very, very diverse. So making it connected together for this study, especially because I think it's very important to know for the main study and for the main area that you are working for the geodiversity, it's very important to know or to do some, to try sometimes to calculate the geological map with different scales and to check which one suits better for that area. And at the same time, I will emphasize here even the size of the cell that I already used, because of course you need to do some calculations before to see which one suits better, which size suits better for your study area.
Might I just add, if I'm allowed, very quickly, that I really appreciate that you have included an element such as the castle, which is made from the local geology, because a lot of geodiversity has been hinged primarily on terra firma, on just the elements of the geology, or the the geological elements of an area. So the rocks, the minerals, the fossils, etc. So now adding this cultural dimension really puts geodiversity smack dab in the middle of geoheritage, which is where we want it to be. We want to be able to attach people to the things and the things to the people. So I really appreciated that. So thanks very much.
Thank you. I really liked your comment right now. It really made me feel good.
Drisela, there is one question in the chat from Naomi. Is there a rule of thumb we can follow on what grid size to use, considering the scale of the data layers?
Again,
please look at the chat if you have it on your screen.
In my opinion, there is no rule. But as I also mentioned before, of course, you need to do some calculations and to see which one suits better. That was also in my case. But mostly, but of course not certain, for this size of the area, 2 times 2 kilometers square is the right one. Thank you, Naomi, for the question.
Based on the data that you have.
Yes.
It always depends on the data and the result, the complexity of the result that you would like to achieve.
Yes. Thank you.
Anybody else? Three, two, one. Thank you, Drisela. Please, others, think about questions, more questions if you have. And you can ask Drisela after the presentation of Károly, who is present. And I would like to ask you to show up yourself. Károly Németh, of Hungarian origin, is the chair of the IUGS Sub-commission on geosites of the Geoheritage Commission. And we are very proud of him because he is the first Hungarian in this position. And he will talk about the geoheritage valorization and the geodiversity estimates within the IUGS geosites, geological heritage sites, and the UNESCO Global Geopark programs. Please, Károly, if you are here, I hope you can hear us.
Hi, everyone.
I see you. Okay.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay. Very good. It was very, very interesting to listen to the previous presentation by Drisela and all the comments. And this made me a little bit calm now, because Paul didn't really provide a very specific kind of goal, what kind of audience I should address this presentation. So I created a relatively general one, not a technical presentation. But after listening the lecture and the discussion, by the way, the lecture was excellent, Drisela. I think that's really great. But the questions highlighting really the wasp nest, which is actually very rapidly opening. And I feel like the presentation, what I give here, is going back to the basics a little bit and clarify many things. Okay, I try my best, and I hope that the teams will be on my side to share my screen. Just confirm back if you can see my screen.
Perfectly, yes.
Oh, okay. So very good. Now, because I have 3 screens in front of me, and sometimes I get confused which is broadcasted and which is not. So, as Paul said, the title of the presentation is Geoheritage Valorization and Geodiversity Estimates within the IUGS Geological Heritage Site and the UNESCO Global Geopark program. So there are many keywords in the title, which providing a little bit of flag, you know, what to expect from this presentation. The valorization and geodiversity estimates. And the two framework, which is so-called very large or very big aim for many studies within this form. I'm Károly Németh. Actually, as Paul said, I'm currently leading this sub-commission within the IUGS, which is the International Union of Geological Sciences. Currently, I'm speaking from Saudi Arabia, where I'm working in a national program of earthquakes and volcanoes. Basically, by training, I'm geologist. Everybody label that I'm volcanologist, but actually I consider myself geologist, and I have a very broad experience of many geological features. About 10 years ago, 12 years ago, when first time I came to Saudi Arabia for a sabbatical, that was a time when I got my interest a little bit shifted from the very strong geological kind of works to understanding geoheritage in a first hand, and gradually shifted to actually understanding what geodiversity and how geoheritage and geodiversity can be interlinked. You see this little logo here, the second 100 IUGS Geological Heritage Site logo, the kind of a occasion that I give this presentation, that in the second 100 list, one of the site in Hungarian site made it in the Bakony-Balaton Highland volcanic field, or the Balaton Highland Global Geopark. This makes it a little bit of a special flair for the presentation. Okay, let's start. What is all these things about? Okay. In these slides, you can see basically Murray Gray, famous, is also more than 10 years, almost a decade old kind of definition was the geodiversity. And I would say that probably this is one of the first sets of publications where actual geodiversity has been explicitly defined. And he said that geodiversity is defined as a natural range or diversity of geological, geomorphological, soil and hydrological features. It includes their assemblages, structures, systems, and contributions to the landscape. If you actually really start to taste this definition or this expression, you really see that is a lot in these two sentences. You really can see that we are looking at basically diversity, which means that you are counting something along some kind of a perimeters, which can be geological or geomorphological as a fundamental asset for those range of natural range. And of course, you're looking at something which is more or less the interface between the geological entity and the atmosphere or the biological environment, the soil, for instance, or the hydrological features, which is actually something which we consider in sedimentological sense, the media or a conduit where the certain grains can reach from A to B and contribute to something in the geological record. You also can see that in this definition, somehow process and basic entity kind of approaches are put together. And you also can see that the landscape and obvious parameter, what we actually can see and consider for when we are talking about diversity. This is all self-explanatory. You also can see, I just put here a couple of days ago, a little bit of search on the Scopus, you know, what the status of this kind of researchers. And you can see that the geodiversity researchers, interestingly, Brazil is one of the focal point of this kind of researchers. And you can see a couple of countries here, a couple of authors, you know, who actually contributed in the mainstream media in this research, and the mainstream kind of a journals, which actually publishing Geoheritage is definitely a flagship journal. So it also means that the Geoheritage journal, Springer journal, is carrying lots of geodiversity works as well. If we are looking for the next slides, and that's looking more or less the yearly appearance of works in the major science media, You can see that the geoheritage research, which is below done here, somehow ticked until the early 2000s and very slowly take place. And in the mid 2000s, is have a kind of a explosion. The geodiversity research is a little bit lagged in comparison. Oh, sorry, the other way. The geodiversity research is a little bit lag behind of the geoheritage research, which is a natural kind of progressions, because the geoheritage is more digestible in the sense of its meaning, is more a research subject where you're actually looking for the geological and geomorphological assets of something without looking at the range of variability or diversity. You also can see here, interestingly, the territory on research is different than what we've seen before, which also reflecting more or less a little bit of the traditional geological approach versus the more advanced technology usage or used approaches for diversity researchers. I put here the Geoheritage book front page, which was published in 2018, from where you really can find the basic fundamentals of this research subject. I also use many diagrams from these books from many of those authors. For instance, in this book, the chapter 1 with Murray Gray, where actually the geodiversity is summed up, he presented a very interesting diagram, the so-called McKelvey box, which is actually something that economic geologists used. I've taught economic geology for a long time, and I find really kind of an interesting to see and present the geoheritage and geodiversity framework in this way, in a sense of looking at geoheritage, what we know, what we actually see on the Earth's surface and below, or beneath the surface, and we actually see how that contribute to basically the geodiversity of the Earth's surface. We also can see, and in this box, a very interesting kind of approach, that obviously there are hypothetical geodiversity and undiscovered geodiversity as well. And in this sum of this diagram, basically providing the total resource, which is the geodiversity of the Earth. It's if you really want to understand what's the meaning of this, it's very fundamental, and I will refer back to these things later on in the presentation, that basically in an area where we don't really have very much idea about the geodiversity and the geoheritage and geoheritage elements, in the future by some processes, even can be man-made or natural, for instance, some kind of a landslide of something which suddenly opening a big cliff face where you can access the rocks and you can see and you can understand essentially the stratigraphy, can add new geoheritage elements, geoheritage to the region, and then that can enrich the geodiversity of the region as well. So it's not a static kind of perspective in that scale. These two quotation here from this chapter is also very interesting just to taste. The first one, it means that it must also be admitted that the term geodiversity has frequently been used rather loosely, sometimes being used as a synonym for geoheritage, earth heritage, geoconservation, or even geology. This I find very interesting and entertaining, because this is more or less one of the grassroots of the discussions what we heard in a previous discussion session after the lecture, because somehow depending on what background of the user or the expert have some kind of a vision or a philosophy about what geodiversity means. It means that the geodiversity in some sense, actually, I wouldn't say subjective, but very much user or expert dependent kind of theory or concept. And I think this we need to somehow acknowledge in this way. So for instance, in the presentation from a culturally trained person try to do geodiversity assessment, and using some kind of an IT technology, naturally will shift the geodiversity perception of that specific area in that way that probably a geologically trained person would look in a very different way. So somehow this is one of the focal point of this discussion, and that's one of the focal point of many scientific discussions and argument in these days. The other things what I find very interesting, and this is very good kind of an answer for Serena's comments in the previous discussion session, how we treat actually heritage. So it means that it is also worth commenting on the word geoheritage. The usual definition of the heritage refers to items inherited from forerunners or the past. But we know that geoconservation is a practice that present applies to current geomorphological or geological processes, to recently formed topography and sediments, and to soils, as well as to much older rocks, landforms, and so on. So is geoheritage an appropriate term to apply to these modern features as well as much older ones surviving to the present day? Current usage would suggest that the answer to this question is rather yes, even if not strictly in line with the traditional use of the heritage concept. I think this is something really very good to just keep in our mind when we're actually doing any of this kind of research, because if you add to this concept, to this statement or this kind of an expression, what actually the heritage means in the context of the Earth, is the Earth's heritage itself, or is a heritage what the human perception, the society evolve on that Earth surface or Earth's geological features? Is not really independent, and probably depending on which line you are, you will have a very different concept. There are hard geology-based visions or views that probably all those cultural kind of things should not be directly linked. This is what Brille actually referring in his comments as more like an element kind of approach. But there are also groups which actually stating that no, because all those things are depending on the human presence. So basically we know all those things because we are humans, and we actually can understand the landscape. Of course, there, in my opinion, there is kind of a compromise in this concept. For instance, and that's why I like the comments from Jamaica, that if you look at, for instance, an island society somewhere in the Pacific, where people actually co-evolved with the natural environment, both abiotic and biotic, they have traditions, and those traditions somehow really reflecting, for instance, certain geological features like volcanism or sea level rise or floodings or landslides and so on. For instance, in Samoa, when you have a tattoo, the tattoo, which is basically a Samoan kind of cultural heritage, if you put in that way, is symbolizing essentially a deep connection to the fire, to the land, to the volcanoes, and the birth of the islands out of the ocean. So that somehow indeed is heritage, and it has a very strong geological connotation. So probably, or hence, we can actually looking at as a geoheritage as well. So if we are looking at other aspects, which in these days how we're looking at geodiversity, there's a very strong notion when the people or experts try to put some kind of a parallel or kind of a line between geodiversity and biodiversity. However, the two things are really very functioning in a very different way. And anybody who doing anything like GIS or advanced technology-based approaches immediately can see the differences, for instance, in a biodiversity, which working with individual species, for instance, which can be identified. So everybody, not everybody, but in a jokey way, we know how the rabbit looks like. So if you really want to looking at, for instance, the rabbit population and population dynamics, we essentially able to pinpoint that elements rather easily, or definitely much easier than when we are looking at a geological map and we actually looking at, for instance, the number of features within this square, what you can see as a grid or an observation or element cell, and comparing to another cell. But you also can see that all these things what we can actually pick up and count as a number density within those cell sizes will depending on the way how we interpret and how we understand the land. And never forget that the geological map is not an abstract kind of thing. The geological map is an interpretative form of the representation of the geological entity what we are looking at, or in other way, the geological map reflecting a common knowledge of a group of experts about the geology of certain region, and the geology map also evolving and changing. So hence, if we are following all those techniques what we've seen before in a previous lecture, essentially the geodiversity value will also change over time. So that's also raises an interesting kind of question that what for we actually doing this geodiversity calculation? Can we actually generate some model, or can we generate something where we can use it as a comparative basis of data? And if we can, which is the scale level where we confidently can say that that's the level where we can actually compare, let's say, a site from Brazil, from Albania, from New Zealand, and so on. In the next slides, I looking at also try to see, for instance, this biodiversity versus geodiversity kind of approach, when we try to find some parallels between the two. What are the differences, or what are the similarities? So I put here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 main lines, what I think is very important to consider before we going deeper comparative assessment of between bio and geodiversity. First of all, the abiotic and biotic kind of concept is that the abiotic processes normally take place in a much longer time scale. We are talking about geological time scale on the most of the cases. However, and this is a very interesting kind of approach, there's a catastrophic time scale which can be in a seconds, minutes, or hours time scale. For instance, an earthquake, a landslide, or a volcanic eruption, which obviously do something very dramatic, which can modify the landscape, so you can deal with landscape modifying elements, or can create even new landscape. So it seems like, for instance, if you are comparing to the biotic region, the time scale what we're looking at specific species, specific lifespan, which is usually in a yearly base. But you also can see evolutionary lifespan, which can be, of course, in a geological time scale, and that's actually a subject of the paleontology. So in this case, the abiotic-biotic connection key is somewhere probably in a paleontological aspects. And I just put here two paper cartoons, for instance, what we can look at in this way from the geological record on the what kind of paleo environment we can actually establish on the basis of certain rocks, which is basically the geoheritage what we are looking at. And we can see what kind of diverse environment that can be read from those certain rocks. And you can see that while most of the cases in a geological scale, these are relatively static and long-term stable situations, what we can see. But then there are basically a catastrophic time scale, very short time scale, where you actually can look at all those features compressed sometimes in a very narrow systematics, very narrow stratigraphical cap. On the other hand, also the abiotic nature can create basically an environment where the biological nature can thrive, and basically the biotic elements have their own biodiversity, which can be logged in the geological record if and we have the certain conditions. For instance, a crater lake like a Mar Lake in the Pula in Western Hungary, which preserved all these creatures what you can see in one way to another. So if we are looking at, for instance, the time scale issues with the bio and geodiversity approach, we can see in this very famous picture that you can see about 7,000 years ago, and maybe a couple of other pluvial periods, you can see very clearly that the Sahara, which is currently one of the most arid region on Earth, you can see that a tiny, and I'm talking about really a couple of tens of millimeter annual rainfall increase can generate very rapidly a very biodiverse region, despite that essentially the geodiversity in this way not really changing significantly, or in the time scale or the geological time scale, for instance, the Lake Chad deposits here just will be preserved in a very short thousands or tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands time scale. So the preservation potential to capture this in the geological record and adding to the geodiversity is rather slim. On the other hand, when we are looking at, for instance, the Grand Canyon in a geological map, you can see that you can access basically along the axis of the canyon over 1 billion years old rocks exposed there. So essentially, in a very long term, the geodiversity in this region, by changing slowly in a geological timescale, it's relatively static. So again, the two things is not really comparable. Very recently, you can see many publications, not many, but quite substantial publications, which try to press that where the geodiversity is high, because that's where the living creatures actually flourish. Essentially, if you increase the geodiversity, you will have a biodiversity increase. I think this is potentially not a smart kind of link to actually emphasize, because it's very clear if you look at the total rainfall vegetation, the water vapor content, the land surface temperature in a global distribution, and you can compare it. Couldn't have that time to create some biodiversity map that Amazonia, we also know in Central Africa, also know the high biodiversity regions, essentially, geologically speaking, relatively boring. So if you are looking at, for instance, the geodiversity of those regions, potentially central Brazil with those very old peneplain surface flat lands, geodiversity sense relatively low, despite that they have high biodiversity. So it means the biodiversity is rather following the water, oxygen, or nutrients, or climate-dependent kind of parameters. And the geodiversity probably play a role of modifying the biodiversity in the sense of, for instance, having suitable rock types, for instance, ophiolite belt somewhere in New Caledonia, which has nickel, chromium kind of surplus, any kind of weathering products, which affecting essentially what type of plants actually or creatures can live on that. The other things is that what I would put a question mark, but the geodiversity is a reflection of the maturity of the lithosphere, for instance. And I'm using purposefully lithosphere, so not just the surface and what we see in the surface exposures, but actually looking at deeper in the below the surface. These two maps showing, for instance, the Arabian microplate. This is the geological map of the Arabian Peninsula. This light pinkish area, basically the oldest rocks, and anything oldest rocks in Neoproterozoic age, and the younger rocks, which are Paleozoic, Mesozoic, representing the story what's happened in the Tethys Ocean and after. Even just visually, very clearly visible in this very broad map, that somehow anything which is outside of the Arabian Shield is relatively simple in comparison to what you can see in the Arab Shield, to the Arabian Shield. You can see it in this close-up in the Arabian Shield, but we are looking at terrains, numerous geological terrains. These terrains essentially formed through repeated succession of subduction, abduction, and all the geological processes that you can imagine. So each of them individually, if you look at for the grid over them, will have much higher geological diversity on their rock types, what you can see, for instance, from the Riyadh area, where you have to drive about 3-4 hours from the capital city of Saudi Arabia to see essentially something exciting in a sense of morphology and geological sense, because everything like flat like pancake, and you really see only limestones. However, heritage perspective, those are important rocks, because those are the rocks which actually provided the oil or petroleum reserve that the modern society actually evolved in this century, last century. So if we're following all those things, we also can see that the geodiversity is maybe a reflection of the dynamic Earth as well. And I just put here 3 very famous locations, essentially the Chilean Andean realm, which is a typical convergent plate margin, where in a less than 300 kilometer belt, you see 3 subduction events, basically from the Jurassic to the modern time, leaving behind a succession of volcanoes, a succession of intermediate and acidic volcanism, and associated mountain forming or mountain raising kind of events by tectonic features, what you can see. You also can see the Himalaya zone, which is essentially a big collisional zone where continent-continent collision take place, and created the most fascinating, very narrow belt on Earth, where you actually can see a much higher number density of geological features, both age, composition, and so on, than anything outside in the Indian main part or in the central or Western Chinese or Tibet region, if you put it that way. And of course, then other things where I come from, partially New Zealand, where you really can see that we are looking at a switching subduction zone, where essentially a Zealandia microcontinent is sliced by a largest transformed fault, a right lateral fault. And you can see that the number of rocks, number and types of rocks, which representing a vast geological time scale across the entire Paleozoic, Mesozoic time, can be accessed within a couple of kilometer distances. So definitely the geodiversity on those areas super high in any measures. So the other aspect, the geodiversity, and here we are gradually moving to the geoheritage concept as well. I try to highlight that it's not the same concept. Basically the process versus result, or a textual and a process kind of approaches. I just put here from this book chapter, which is prepared for volcanic systems, that when we actually looking at or try to compare and understand the geodiversity of the region, we need to understand those geoheritage parts, which can be texture or process oriented or descriptive or rather interpretative aspects of the concept. Murray Gray, in this 2018 book chapter, emphasized an interesting approach to geosystem services, which based on the ecosystem services. This is also somehow can be linked to the geodiversity concept. Essentially, we need to looking at what and how a geosystem works, basically from the regulating, supporting, provisioning, cultural and knowledge approach. Why this is not directly related to the geodiversity itself, but I find very interesting and again very nicely connected to the previous discussion, because essentially Murray Gray put the knowledge approach or knowledge kind of concept, which is basically the science concept, as a part of a services what geosystems provide to the Earth, and that's actually quite an interesting and important aspects if we are looking at was a BRILA geoheritage valorization system, where the science actually became one of the main force to pull everything. So measuring geodiversity, Swinning-Zwolinski paper on the same book, I highly recommend to read, because it contains several tables, which I think it's very, very good and very nicely answering to the questions what was before. These are the set of criteria, what to choose, what methods, and how we actually can utilize geodiversity, because one of the main questions really, what for we are doing all these things. So we need to actually somehow define what's the purpose of the assessment. We need to actually find the right subject of the assessments, what we actually really want to do, a holistic approach. We want to do a selective approach or an arbitrary approach. So I think this also something very clearly has to be defined before we do anything like this. We need to actually looking at the scale, and obviously this is Margaret Brock's and Prof. Semenyuk works, was the original work from Western Australia, the local, regional, national, continental, or global. I would say that I also like to put this kind of scales more in a geological, or stronger in the geological concept, geological aspects. So for instance, if we are looking at a large ignimbrite field somewhere in South America, we need to actually looking at in that scale what that ignimbrite actually may representing in the geological sense. And I think the previous presentation was focusing on the assessment techniques. So this is only one part of the full story. So the assessment techniques, we can have qualitative, quantitative, and qualitative assessment. Very important that geologists, trained geologists are usually more affinitive to the qualitative assessment, which means like it's either an intuitive, affective, or expert kind of approach. It means that basically someone who spends lots of time in certain geological entity can or have more knowledge about, for instance, what to see on these pictures. By the way, this picture is not from the Mars, but it could be. It look like that. That was one of the field area I worked recently, and tomorrow early morning driving next areas to explore for a week. So this presentation, or the previous presentation, was more or less the quantitative, qualitative approach, where we've seen advanced technologies to actually apply how to distinguish all those geodiversity elements. Again, in this Walensky chapter, you see very nice this block diagram, and this is what we heard before when we actually using in a quantitative method some sort of indices, you know, how actually we can count all those elements. And of course, in these days, the qualitative methods, which is the most difficult one and probably the most challengeable method in a sense of we are still not there yet, you know, to have a unified way. I don't really want to spend too much things because the previous presentation covered these things. This is how the geodiversity calculation or geodiversity index calculation could be done. Basically, Serrano and Ruiz Flaño works, several works, 3-4 papers date back in the early 2000 or late 2010, 7 in these years. And basically, I just show here that we also use this kind of approach with one of my colleagues and students from Colombia, when we actually checked Chinchina river basin in Caldas region in Colombia. And you can see that basically from it's whatever data you have, whatever geological data you actually can put on your hand, or morphological data, you can create basically your own systematics. In this own systematics, you can choose basically various grid size. You can change the grid size, and you actually can play with those things. It's more like geoinformatic problem. There are lots of issues actually with those things, which actually Naomi pointed out about the scale, what kind of grid cells we are using, because that's definitely will affect very strongly the outcome. But again, if you remember the previous slides, everything is depending for the purpose. So one of the questions before was like, why 2 kilometer grid size or 1 kilometer grid size is something like everybody using, like kind of a grid cell size. And one of the answers for that is that these are normally the sizes where any kind of conservation approach, for instance, can take place. For instance, 1 or 2 kilometer, let's say 2 kilometer access area, it gives us a very graphic kind of representation of a sizable area which can go under some kind of a geoconservation policy. So planners, for instance, very friendly with us if we're actually providing this kind of scale for them. Of course, this is also, as I said, is a geoinformatics problem, because if you have only 1 to 500,000 scale geological maps, or you have way better scale geological maps, you either not really capturing the real diversity of the region, or you got lost in the diversity what you get, and you're actually creating not so useful outcome that nobody will really take seriously or will understand properly. With my former PhD student, he just successfully defended his PhD last week with a very, very thorough and very eye-opening defense, which took nearly 4 hours, highlighted exactly the same problems and issues what we discussed before. In this work, Vlad Zakarovsky actually worked in the Coromandel Peninsula in North New Zealand, and this table just showing, for instance, what's the starting points. Before we actually going any deeper high advanced technology usage, we need to see what kind of assets we actually have, what we actually looking at. So in briefly, the Coromandel Peninsula is basically a few million years old former arc volcanic region with intermediate volcanism and some other kind of young volcanism and some rhyolitic calderas. So it seems obviously the volcanic geoheritage in this sense will kind of overshadow everything. So does the expectation, and does the kind of category, for instance, that we cannot really ignore, because in the large sizable areas, this is the areas which actually, this is the subject what we actually need to looking at. But you really can see that, for instance, in this assessment, the human, we used in that time, the human footprints, for instance, archaeological site from the Polynesian Maori culture, and of course the modern European contract, because the mining, mostly gold mine in the areas, has a very important heritage component. And obviously, if you look at the future of New Zealand, this mining and the geology behind determined the richness or the current state of New Zealand in nearly 150 years later. So when we were doing all these calculations, we came up with a different approach, and this is what Vlad published in this paper in the Land, where we actually looked a little bit further on these things, because basically there are two things that we came across. One, that geodiversity should be somehow comparable. So if I do something in the Coromandel Peninsula, I would, or ideally would be really nice if I would be able to compare that, let's say, from somewhere in the Balaton Highland in Hungary. This is one approach. The other approach that we were thinking that actually, when we are looking at for geodiversity indexes, what we've seen in the table before, those indexes basically providing us a number density, which is okay, but is not necessarily providing further information toward, what for that actually can be useful. So, for instance, if I looking at 15 different geological formation in, let's say, in 1 square kilometer area, it's diverse, because obviously I can see the number density is there. But if all of them like some sort of sandstones, it won't really provide some helpful information for planners, or anybody to see that, let's say, that's really something we really have to focus, because just purely because there is higher number of specific rock types in certain areas, it's not evidently, at least not to me, justified that that area is, let's say, more important for any things like geoeducation, geotourism, and so on. So that's why we came up with this framework that we actually valorize basically the diversity elements, basically added some kind of a factor for that. This was one of the first paper where we just show basically this relative abundance kind of concept for certain rock types, which seemingly worked in a very coarse way. But obviously had lots of problems, and we actually developed this further. And I would say that it's somehow really showing something, but this is actually already something which not is depart from the simple geodiversity concept. And this is where we actually connecting to Jose Brila work. He actually came from a very different geological background, building inventories with an idea, with a goal that we actually want to see what is on Earth, and we want to know geologically their interest. So basically he put up these 3 questions: that what makes an element of geodiversity exceptional, for instance? How should the high value of geodiversity elements be identified and characterized? How and why should geoheritage be assessed? So actually really the number 1 question for me is actually the 3, what for we all do these things. So he actually created this famous diagram in the 2016 paper, and some clones from the same diagram appeared in later publications, with the nature diversity, which having geodiversity and biodiversity. We are in this track, and he put the scientific value of those elements as a key, regardless that they are in situ or ex situ repairs, let's say what is in the museums. And he naming, for instance, the in situ geoheritage features as geosites and geoheritage elements, which are ex situ, which is somewhere in the museum. He also say that if something has no scientific value, in his opinion, can have other values, but then it's probably should be called as a geodiversity sites in a sense, or geodiversity elements rather than geodiversity. It's of course geodiversity, but he really emphasizing that difference, which I would say it makes sense, because this actually making a kind of a clear approach. But, and as I will return back to this concept, it's also raised lots of questions how we actually incorporating in those geoheritage or those geodiversity abiotic elements essentially, which has never been studied in so-called in a Western approach. And I think with the biggest flaw in this model is, it's not flaw, but the biggest challenging aspects of this, that this actually very Western or westernized kind of approach. So if you go to an outer islands in Vanuatu, for instance, or Solomon Islands, sometimes you go to villages where people live there in peace for kind of a peace for over 3,000 years time. They have excellent knowledge about their geo-environment, what they actually have to over-survive and live, but nothing ever been published. So for instance, on that areas in this framework, if we're strictly following to this framework, the valorization of those and the level of geodiversity concept there would be extremely low because there's no traceable scientific value on that way. So it's lots of things to actually consider. He summarized in this table basically the scientific education, geotourism, and recreation kind of approach, you know, what you actually can be measured, and looking at their users and beneficiaries and the values associated with them as a key concept. He also proposed to restrict the term, the geological heritage or geoheritage, to in situ and ex situ elements with scientific value. This concept actually taken in this last couple of years is one of the very decisive kind of aspects, partially because the original concept of geoheritage is a little bit moved away to, and especially it came out very well for the UNESCO Global Geopark assessments, moved in that way when essentially the geology fell behind of recognition what actually there. So this actually somehow putting back into to the right place, in my opinion. This table showing basically the task, you know, the kind of a strategic plan. And you can see in this table that the representativeness, integrity, rarity, and the scientific knowledge is sort of very important for the scientific use. Educational use, the didactic potential, variety of geological element, accessibility and safety. While in the tourism and the recreational use, the scenery, interpretative potential, accessibility and safety are the key. So you really can see that if you're looking at these parameters or looking at this main philosophical concept behind all these elements, we can see that you almost can see where GIS can come in, you know, how to measure and what to look for, what data look for. So here are the scientific use, educational use, again, just a few keywords. I'm not spending when I'm reading up, and the geotouristic way, just to say, show this. Here I just present this little diagram from our work, also from the Coromandel Peninsula, where we used our geodiversity assessment method, where basically the morphology, which is represented by the slope models, the geological model, which is represented by the relative abundance of certain rock types, combined and created some kind of a geodiversity model, what we actually later changed and called as almost like a geodiversity heat map or hotspot kind of approach or map. As a result, we can see that, for instance, in this map, these are the areas where we have this larger color, higher geoheritage intensity or a higher geodiversity intensity. We can see that when we are looking at in a field, indeed, even visually, you can see that, yeah, these are the area where if I would be just like a tourist and I never been here, yeah, I would like to walk on this track because I have very good view, very dramatic morphology, very dramatic coastal areas, everything is exposed, and a wide range of rocks can be seen there. Then with another PhD student, Károly Németh, we actually worked how we can actually use common data, for instance, like a big data, like Flickr or even Instagram and so on, all sorts of things by using some Python codes and data mining from the web. And looking at, for instance, or try to create a geoeducation capacity kind of approach, which is not geodiversity, obviously, but go a little bit further on that and using the diversity or the geological diversity, in this case, volcanic geology diversity in the area, in the Auckland volcanic field, and combining those geological features with what people actually taking photographs, where people actually want to go, and what expert opinions or experts would classify an area that, yeah, that's where school kids really can learn about volcanism and so on, and what experts like scientists actually would consider for all those things. So when all these things bunch together, essentially you could create a nice map which are showing essentially the geoeducation capacity map of Auckland city, which is the largest city of Auckland. And all these things was done with the purpose that Auckland city sitting on a young, still active volcanic field where volcanic eruption can take place anytime. The youngest one was about 600 years ago, formed the largest volcano just here, just in a time when the Maoris arrived from the Polynesian voyage. So we tried to use this geoeducation capacity kind of map where to actually focus funds, where to focus planning strategies, where certain geoeducational programs could run. Okay, so what is the IUGS role or any other organization role on these things? For instance, the IUGS, which is basically the International Union of Geological Science, has a Geoheritage Commission, and the Geoheritage Commission has a specific sub-commission, 3 sub-commissions. One of them is the sub-commission on sites or on geosites. Basically, this commission provides expert opinion on the UNESCO Global Geopark evaluation, and also now running the IUGS Geological Heritage Sites program. So, for instance, all what I was talking before, if we find a very nice and transparent methods or any method, can be used, for instance, to feeding information to decision makers for these programs. Of course, the IUGS and this commission is just only one kind of body which dealing with this kind of programs. There are local programs, for instance, within a council like Auckland City Council and any other council which actually try to step in for the conservation perspective and get geo into their programs. So all what we talked before is actually makes sense and is very important. So that's why it's very important to have discussions and forums like this. So this IUGS currently, I just take over, I elected for this, sharing this with Benjamin and Gonzalo Lozano, is operating basically some voting members as well from ideally a representative list of experts who really representing not just the subject but also regional aspects, and can actually say something for all these questions, what these decisions making take place. So what are the definitions and standards? So the first 100 IUGS Geological Heritage Sites was actually a program which essentially started in 2021 and culminated in 22. And the IUGS Geological Heritage Site is a key place with extraordinary geological elements or processes of the highest scientific relevance, used as a global reference and or with a substantial contribution to the development of geological sciences through history. You can download this process and the selection process, and you can see in this brochure, it essentially emerged from an IGCP project, the 731, but another 2 projects run before or parallel with this program and actually now fuse together and work together. So the first 100 IUGS Geological Heritage Site received 181 applications by March 2022. 56 countries was represented, and essentially 34 voting members essentially evaluated with a very simple evaluation system, basically questioning that fulfilling completely, not so much, or not really. So this was a very important aspect in this IGS committee, that make it as simple as possible, that the expert actually not get lost. So that's why, for instance, when we are doing the geodiversity assessment, which could be a very good tool to make it transparent, if it's too complicated or difficult to understand, probably we will have just a very good scientific discussion with not so much or kind of good outcome for contributing for the decision making. So basically 149 sites been selected in this first round, And it means that the first 100 was accepted in 22 and 32 differed to the later ones, and there was some fallout in the list. The first 100 was according by the decision was by the voting members scoring, the geographical distribution and the typology, basically avoiding some subject, let's say sedimentology or volcanology, overrepresented. And you can see that the first 100 regional distribution became really cool, basically essentially from Samoa to Vanuatu to Norway to basically every corner on Earth was almost represented. 100 sites represented 56 countries. You can see this was the distribution of country-wise. And this was more or less the total submission distribution on the typologies, and this was the accepted first 100. You can see that we tried the best, relatively even representation for the main subject areas. Then the second 100 IUGS Heritage Sites program started essentially right away because this first 100 was so successful and so strong resonance through the global community that it was inevitable to use. So the main goal in this was, actually was a clear declaration in this process, that implementation of a global program led by the IUGS International Commission on Geoheritage for the recognition of geological heritage sites that are essential for the development of geological sciences. So why is this initiative necessary? Well, it is a recognition of our science. It's very important, that actually get the voice and the noise out to see the broader science and the broader societal community that actually the geology is a very important aspect on our life. You can see also that somehow the scientists need a recognition through this thing. So since these programs essentially started and functioned, an unprecedented number of scientists, geoscientists turn up and actually do something very exciting and very new, out of the box kind of work. And of course, the big goal, that we actually want to highlight and want to see the turn the eyes of the decision makers, that is important to preserve the geological features on Earth. And of course, because this was in a spirit of collaboration, it also show a very good global representation how collaborative science should or would work. This was more or less the timeline. And I would like to share this to you, that essentially 17 international organizations was involved in this second 100 program, which was a significant increase in comparison to the first 100, like the Sedimentological Association as a new Meteorological Society joined. It means that essentially those organizations somehow been approached and asked to somehow find or nominate locations, or actually find the right people who actually may be able to interested in to nominate places. So the second 174 candidates came from 64 countries, and 23 new countries appeared: Bolivia, Venezuela, New Zealand. Of course, I should have put there Hungary as well, which means that now the program is truly global. The distribution of the candidates is just showing basically the sites which are postponed from the first one, this left, and the new sites proposed in 2023 like this. And this somehow, the evaluation process generated the second 100. Also some few sites differed to the third 100 program. Not just the scale, that this is not a small scale program. What's happened? So lots of 89 experts was actually involved directly. It means 4 or 5 evaluation per sites went through in the evaluation, and 714 evaluation has been completed. So it was a massive global program. And this second 100 was more sophisticated evaluation method. It's incorporated more tools from all the first part of this lecture, to looking at those aspects as well. But still, somehow we try to keep it as simple as possible, and using this 4-grade kind of evaluation system. And then this was more or less the result. So the cutoff period was everything should have been about 3 points to actually make it to the second 100. And you can see that 120 sites made it in this 3 to 4. So the quality of the submissions and the presentation style was absolutely mind-blowingly excellent. It caused a little bit of headache, you know, how to actually set the threshold values. But there were some natural withdrawals and other things like that. So essentially the final score, again, we followed a little bit Jose Brila approach that the scientific assessment was one of the key element, and that had to be the geology and the geological science. And when I'm talking about geology, I mean anything, better to use earth science or geoscience aspects. So it's a morphology or geomorphology as well. And then all the other minor aspects which actually been used for the final selections. There was a selection committee which actually essentially made the final decision, and of course there was an international organizations and a representative. For instance, the International Association for the Conservation of Geological Heritage, or ProGEO, Kevin Page represented the ProGEO in this process. So essentially, it was a fairly thorough and I would say fairly realistic outcome. And then the second 100 distribution showing here, you can see that 11 sites was directly deferred to the third one, which already suggesting that there will be a third volume, because again, the pressure that this process somehow need to be continued is huge. This is the distribution of the typological and comparison between the first and the second. There's not a huge changes. Volcanology a little bit dropped back, but it's probably because volcanic sites are a little bit more diversified through mineralogy and geomorphology, and a little bit of the tectonic aspects. So there are some changes, but more or less the same representative distribution. This is the geographical distribution of the second 100. You can see the like Hungary made it now in this list, and it's really cool. And again, you can see that somehow Africa is now picking up, and more submissions expected for the third one. If you're plotting on the map, and you can see in this website the designations, you can see that actually fairly nicely distributed. There are still countries like Thailand and Southeast Asia or Indonesia where you would have expect something to come, but it's still not there yet. If you check the website, the designations are really online, and also can be downloaded as a PDF. The official announcement took place on the 37th International Geological Congress in Busan in this year, August, on the 2nd. And this now became really a kind of a continuation that the International Geological Congress will be the main kind of aspects of this kind of announcement every 4 years. It has a huge media response for all these programs. We are currently collecting all the informations anywhere in the world where media impact actually had, and we can say that we have an unprecedented response. So it's hard to comprehend really the number of media actually came. I just see Saudi Arabia, for instance. The major TV channels and media lines were all over the show because the Al-Waqba marketer made it. And I just can tell you that because of this progress and this kind of success, a new research has been initiated here in this crater, which actually working for the European Space Agency to actually looking for evidences of conditions for how in this harsh environment, extreme environment, biological features can over-survive within the salt, and using this, basically this IUGS Geological Heritage sites as an analogy for future landing in outer moons of the solar system, what the European Space Agency plan to looking at potential life forms in those extreme environments. So this is how science or geoscience can work together through these processes, and how these things can actually connect back to to the first part of the presentation. I also would like to draw your attention that there is other two IUGS organization, the Geo Collection and the Heritage Stone Collection, which is looking at a different kind of aspect of geoheritage, if you put it that way. You can buy these books if you want a hard copy or just free download in these sites. And of course, the question is what next? It is inevitable that the third 100 IUGS Geological Heritage Site program will start. We have a little break now, but probably in early 2025, the global announcement will take place. And there will be some differences because in this third 100, there will be much more emphasis on the geocultural aspects of this kind of works. And also we really want to emphasize those geoheritage aspects of our planet where let's say indigenous cultures and languages actually flourish, and how all those heritage elements moved in and providing some aspects. I have had no time, and I think I really want to finish. It's getting too long. I'm not really going deeply into the UNESCO Global Geopark evaluation program or evaluation system, but that's also following fairly similar kind of approach like with this, what I just outlined here. And the IUGS and this Geoheritage Commission take quite a big share on those works because UNESCO actually really want to have the scientific basis right for all those applications and putting the geoscience as the number one on the decision making. I would say that if you're interested and if you want to take part of these programs or anything, just drop an email because we need evaluators, we need people who actually understanding the geoheritage, geodiversity concept as a whole and has experiences and can represent some sort of aspects of geological sciences. Thank you very much. This is a photo yesterday I took in the field. We went out for a day trip just to check some location. A potential master program will start somewhere here. And tomorrow I'm heading to the field in another place for a 1-week field work, also heritage research. I'll stop sharing, and if you have any questions, just put on the chat box and or just ask directly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Károly, for the excellent presentation. I think that was a very nice synthesis of all the definitions that we do care about as scientists working on the field of geoheritage and geodiversity. So all little pieces that we try to puzzle together, it's very nice that you make a well visible and well interpretable result of it. And the first, second, and third 100 books are the result of every geoscientist's work who do work on geoheritage and geodiversity. And it was very nice to hear it together in one presentation. And if anybody has any comments or questions, please. Don't be shy. One practical question from me. I know that you are very busy. How do you balance between all your geological work and field work and your administrative works?
Oh, very good question. Like all of us, very difficult. And I think I can't wait for this series over because I think I'm a little bit overdone. But you know, I love what I'm doing. So currently I have a kind of a dream position, if you would put in that way, because well, I'm working for the Geological Survey fundamentally here, but also in Hungary in Sopron in the Institute of Earth Physics and Space Science. So we actually I have a fairly big liberty, if you put in that way, but also very high commitment, really. Like right now after this lecture, I have to write a few-page report from a site where what we visited yesterday, where somebody asked that is it a volcano or not, but you know, it's just have to create a couple of GIS maps is already on other screen. So this is, I guess, yeah, it's very, very different, very, how shall I say, very difficult to find a balance indeed. And of course, right now I'm a lonely bird because my family is not in Saudi Arabia. So because my family is in Samoa, so my boy is just in a school there. So I'm a distant father right now. So in this aspect, yeah, it's a little bit helpful. But of course, yeah, it's difficult. But I have a full love for geology, geoscience, and I really just want because. I just really have to express that, well, I'm geologist, but I love geomorphology, geography, and so on. And I really want to, my priority is all the time the holistic kind of approach. But yeah, geology or geosciences are just beautiful.
Naomi has a question. Are the IUGS sites by invite, or can we propose sites from our country?
Oh, Naomi, you haven't sent what you promised to me to send. Sorry, I just have to tease her. Very good question. Yes, maybe it was not evident in the lecture. It is not an invitation only, but while the first 100 was relatively liberal in a way that if a group was there and the group really decided, let's say a Geo Society or club or something, yeah, this is the site, they can submit, and if they passed it, they made it. The second 100 was more structured, and I think the third one will be even more structured, that avoiding, and I can tell you really hairy, strange stories, that avoiding a national conflict of various organizations, including ministerial level organizations, we insist now that every nation need to have some national representative and a body which actually contacting and actually ratifying the submissions, and or an international organization with standing behind, and the people who promoting or proposing it somehow aligned with that international organization request or requirement. For instance, Naomi, if you really want to do something, and if you're thinking about the Philippines, I guess, but I probably can find for you who is the currently from the Philippines with whom we had a connection. Contact with those people, propose that, yeah, the Tal volcano is something because of and you prepare it. They will say yes. So never happened that, you know, it's other way. Or contact, let's say, with IFC or the IAS or some other organization.
I see.
And then you just do the job, and that's it. I mean, there were really cases where there was misunderstanding and things like that, you know, like some group submitted, they went through, and suddenly the national UNESCO organization suddenly felt like, oh, this, how come that they, you know, it's kind of we are humans, so, and this is a little bit of social science, you know, like, but that's not invitation. Of course, we can discuss, or if you contact any of us directly and you propose, you just outline what's your plan, we could give some advice, you know, how to highlight and things like that. Okay. But the evaluation, as you know, it will be very objective, and it's really, it's not like you contact me, oh yeah, let's have this, and I say, oh yeah, you don't worry, you will get it. Because there will be really probably 5% who read through, and really this year was absolutely amazing comments, really. Yes.
Okay, thanks. We're looking into that, especially for geocultural sites. We might have some.
Yes, that's,
and I will send you the email.
Yeah, no, please do that. And anybody who is in this audience now, that because, and personally, I really do all my best to have those sites. I wouldn't say prioritize, but, you know, put a little bit ahead, because I absolutely agree with the, you know, the discussion before the previous lecture, that yes, the geocultural aspects are very important, and there are places where really so rich, and I think Philippines, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, just among those key areas, or anywhere in Polynesia, where where those are really the real heritage things, which absolutely, and is really connected. It's not just like a building or something and there are some rocks and you collect, but it's really something where people living because they depend still on a volcano or something.
Anybody else? Even to Drisela? If no, I think everybody can reach you through your email addresses. I will upload the presentations and the discussions to YouTube. So all others who were not attended or were not able to attend here will be able to watch and ask you about your research and your jobs. And I would like to thank you both for your presentations. Both presentations were absolutely perfect. Thank you for your cooperation. And I hope that both of you will be in connection with the Hungarian ProGEO. And thank you for the audience for your attendance, and good evening, good night, and have a very nice weekend to all of you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Pav, for this fantastic event. Yeah, and
Thank you.
don't forget to submit something from Hungary.
We will. We have to prepare documents.
Very good. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.